Dean, Faculty of Social and Political Science, Ibu Dr. Misbah Julfa Elizabeth, Honorable to the Head of Center, Director of Postgraduate Program, Head of Bureau, and the most importantly, Honorable to all of our invited speaker, Prof. Edward Aspinall from
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Welcome. Thank you so much for your participating with us. Bapak Azmil Tayyib PhD from USA, Malaysia. Welcome and thank you so much for your participating with us. Ibu Husnul Maria PhD from Universitas Indonesia. Thank you so much for your participating with us. Prof. Andi Fefta Wijaya PhD from Universitas Brawijaya, representative Portuguese Indonesia, Forum Dekan Ilmu Sosial Indonesia. Welcome and thank you so much for your participating with us. And welcome Bapak Dr. Muriel Fawanani. Thank you. Now already here with me in the state. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so I would like to say thank you for each and every one of you for to be here with us today. And we also very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been with us and in the Zoom meeting, as well as in YouTube for joining Econ DEMOST in the plenary session too. Ladies and gentlemen, in this plenary session too, we are going to discuss about the very important issues nowadays, humanity and democracy in post-COVID-19 era. As we know, the issue is getting the great attention nowadays, as we know that the COVID-19 outbreak has slowed down on the global economy and it's affected on the health system and social change, and the pandemic outbreak has also affected the global political order and democratic process in around the world and the political process in various parts of the world, including Southeast Asian countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia. A government policy in dealing with the pandemic has a significant effect on public satisfaction, the popularity of the government, and the character of regime in some democratic countries in the world, including in Southeast Asian countries, such as Indonesia and Malaysia. Less democracy or more illiberalism. Therefore, based on this condition, we need to space for academic conversation as an effort to generate a good idea for the future of democracy and humanity after the COVID-19 era. And now we would have 5 speakers who will give the great presentation to explain their experiences or their research about the politics, democracy, and COVID-19 outbreak in some Southeast Asian countries, and especially Indonesia, because we have 3 speakers from Indonesia, and they are going to explain about the condition of Indonesian democracy today in the pandemic era. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion in this session, I'm going to give some information about how we do this discussion. The first, every speaker has a time to give presentation around 15 to 20 minutes. And then the second, after all speaker presentation, we would have the Q&A session around 60 minutes. And the third, for the participant can write question and comment in the chat room. And then we want to select some question will be asked verbally by the participating during the Q&A session if the time still have in this room. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me move and start our discussion today with the first speaker, with the Prof. Edward Aspinall. Before I give the time to the Prof. Edward Aspinall, I would like to share the short information about his biography. Prof. Edward Aspinall is a professor in the Department of Political and Social Science, Coral School of Asia-Pacific Affairs, Australian National University. He researched politics in Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, with interest in democratization, ethnicity, and colonialism, among other topics. He has authored 3 books. The first is Opposing Suharto, Compromise Research and Regime Change in Indonesia. I think this book is conducted from his PhD thesis. And the second book is Islam and Nation, Separatist Rebellion in Aceh, Indonesia, published in Stanford University Press in 2009. And the book with the title Democracy for Sale, Election, Clientelism, and the State in Indonesia. I think the book is very famous in Indonesia because making controversy among secular and politicians in Indonesia. And as we know, in the conference manual, Prof. Ed, I think, published 70 international journal article. I think it's very amazing achievement. And he's also published some book chapter, most of aspect of Indonesian politics. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's give the time for Prof. Edward Spinall. Prof. Edward Spinall, time is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, great. First of all, let me say what an honor it is to speak at this conference at UIN Walisongo. I have great memories of my last visit there in person. It's too bad that we can't visit there and see you face to face, but at least we can meet virtually over Zoom. So I'm going to speak today about COVID and politics in Southeast Asia and a little bit in Indonesia. So let me just share my screen so you can see it. Is that visible to you?
Yes, okay.
Okay, great. So I think for people like us who are political scientists or are interested in politics, there are really 2 big questions that we can ask about the interaction between politics and the pandemic. One, of course, is how does politics shape the pandemic? To what extent do we know that political factors have had an effect on the pandemic outcome? But the second question is, how does the pandemic shape politics? Now, it's mostly that second question that I will be addressing today. But let's briefly talk about what the impact of politics on the pandemic might be. One of the big questions, of course, is whether there is an impact of different sorts of regimes. So, for example, there's still a lot of debate in the literature, and I don't think this question is yet resolved about whether democratic or authoritarian regimes have been more effective at dealing with the pandemic. It seems, in fact, that there's not much effect of regime form on the effectiveness of the pandemic response. Other factors such as government policy, the role of leadership, state capacity in particular are at least equally important. So this is from about a month or so ago, but you can see there that some authoritarian countries such as China have been very effective at dealing with the pandemic. But some authoritarian countries, such as Russia, have been much less effective. Some democratic countries, like the United States, have been quite ineffective, but others, like New Zealand, have been quite effective. Of course, there are other ways that politics can shape pandemic outcomes. For example, mass political attitudes. So, for example, there's a lot of interest in the United States about how political partisanship affects attitudes towards the vaccine, with supporters of the Republican Party and of former President Donald Trump being much more reluctant to accept vaccination, and therefore Republican states having much higher levels of the pandemic, especially during the Delta variant. But what I'm really interested in talking about today is the effect that the pandemic is having on politics, so the opposite direction of causation. And I think it's widely accepted now that there is a big effect politically on the global level. And the major effect is that the pandemic seems to have accelerated the process of democratic regression. We know that for about the last, depends how you measure it, but maybe the last 10, 15 years, the so-called third wave of democratization has come to an end, and we see more countries experiencing backwards movement, becoming more authoritarian than becoming more democratic. And we can see from this chart, which is produced by VDEM, that that process really accelerated a lot in 2020. So many more countries becoming more authoritarian than becoming more democratic. Now, what are the mechanisms that we can begin to examine as part of trying to understand the relationship between the pandemic and democratic regression? If we think about this very simply, we can think about mechanisms that operate from above, i.e. that involve intervention by the state or by the government, and those that happen from below. So from above, of course, democratic regression, or sometimes called autocratization, always involves what's sometimes called executive aggrandizement, i.e. the increased power of the executive government in comparison to civil society groups, in comparison to often to other branches of government, and to society as in general. The pandemic helps accelerate this process because it provides an excuse. Many governments have decided they needed to increase their own power and their authority in order to put in place pandemic measures such as lockdowns and curfews and so on. But it also provides that opportunity for governments to take action. Now, there's a lot of debate here about when precisely an emergency measure becomes authoritarian, because even if you look like a country like my own country at the moment, Australia, we have lockdowns, which in themselves are quite authoritarian, reducing citizens' freedom of movement, involving the police in enforcement of restrictions on freedom of movement. But the question really is whether these are seriously designed to deal only with the pandemic and are removed once the pandemic danger recedes. But there's also mechanisms from below, because it's possible that in fact there could be community support for authoritarian measures in response to the pandemic. And indeed, one of the characteristic features of the current global shift towards more authoritarian regimes is that often it is elected leaders who enjoy a lot of popularity who are engaging in reducing democratic rights and freedoms in particular countries. If we look across Southeast Asia, we know, and Indonesia, we know that most scholars of Southeast Asia would agree that Southeast Asia has been experiencing democratic backsliding for some time. We know, of course, most obviously cases like Philippines under Duterte, who's a classic sort of authoritarian populist figure who believes very much in the use of violent force to resolve social and political problems. We know, for example, about the Thailand coup from 2014 and only partial restoration of civilian rule. Indonesia, I think most scholars of Indonesia would agree that there has also been a democratic decline since at least 2014, although it is not dramatic. Since COVID began in Southeast Asia, we see an acceleration of these processes. The coup d'etat in Myanmar, of course, earlier this year, Thailand, increasing confrontation between the government and opposition. Malaysia, first emergency rule, now the return of UMNO. I'm sure Dr. Azmin Tayyip will be talking about that. Introduction of very harsh, extremely harsh measures in the Philippines. And then in Indonesia as well, we see all these measures around the omnibus law, the weakening of the KPK, reduction of civil society space, increasing moves against critics of the government, and now, of course, talk about, although it's not yet realized, but talk about extending the president's period in government to a third term. But what I'm really interested in presenting to you today is some data that tries to look at the second question of the impact on politics of the pandemic from below, i.e., to what extent are changing social and political attitudes driven by the pandemic potentially giving rise to political changes and potentially emboldening political leaders to take actions to reduce the amount of democratic rights and protections in their particular countries. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this survey that we conducted a few months ago. The survey was conducted across 5 countries of Southeast Asia with 6,000 respondents, so about 1,000 respondents in each country, 2,000 in Indonesia. It was conducted mostly before the current Delta wave really began. So before, for example, the hospitals became very overwhelmed in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, but still well into the pandemic. It was an online survey because it's not possible to do face-to-face surveys in the current conditions. So it's not really nationally representative in each country and tends to oversample people who are educated, higher income, and therefore have better internet access. But nevertheless, the results are quite interesting. So one thing we asked people about is how satisfied they were with the national government's response to COVID-19. And you can see that, in fact, apart from Singapore, which we would expect because Singapore has been recognized as having one of the most effective COVID responses internationally, we can see actually that the satisfaction with the national government's response was actually very high in Indonesia at about 62%. When we asked a second set of questions about, do you think the president could have done a better job? Do you think the government could have done a better job? Do you think the local government could have done a better job? In fact, many Indonesians agreed with that the government should have done a better job, but nevertheless, they say they are quite satisfied, which would suggest high support for the government. Then we asked this second question, which is about asking respondents, to tell us what they think, whether the COVID pandemic has shown them that their country needs a strong government that puts less emphasis on individual rights, i.e. a more authoritarian government, or secondly, a government that protects individual rights. Quite interesting variation here across the different countries. So the blue color is for the more authoritarian option, and the red color is for the more democratic option. You can see the responses in Indonesia are quite evenly split. In Singapore, we get relatively strong support for a less democratic government, whereas in the Philippines, which is quite interesting, seeing President Duterte enjoys such popularity, we actually see a lot of support for better protection of individual rights. However, one interesting question that we also begin to examine in the report I showed you before is, to what extent are these responses affected by various demographic qualities of the population, for example, gender, ethnicity, religion, and so on. One of the most interesting factors we show here is that class position or economic status has a big difference. So one of the questions we asked people was thinking about your regular weekly income, so your how much money you make every week. Do you typically earn enough money to save, enough for living expenses, barely enough? So barely enough would be, I guess, pas-pasan, or do you need help to cover your daily living expenses? And one of the interesting findings we see here, not so strong in Indonesia, but certainly very strong in countries like Singapore and Thailand, much less strong in the Philippines, is that wealthier people, more comfortable people, tend to be much more supportive of strong authoritarian government, or a government that does not protect individual rights. So again, it's more evidence that Southeast Asian middle classes often tend to be quite authoritarian in their political outlook. And that seems to be the conclusion that many people are drawing from the pandemic. Indonesia, interestingly, again, it's not a big, there's just not much variation across social class in Indonesia. Another question we asked was whether, given conditions in which the government said that the pandemic was going to get much worse, we asked people, would they agree to support the following measures? So these are some, one is a curfew, so jam malam. So it's like a measure which you could argue does have some effect on reducing the pandemic. And then we asked whether they would agree with the government censoring the media. Would they agree with the military becoming involved in government to deal with the pandemic? We asked whether they would agree with suspension of freedoms for a period, such as freedom of association and freedom of expression, and whether they would agree with passing emergency laws without the approval of the parliament or the Congress across these countries. And this is the response across all countries, and you can see that the results are quite mixed, actually. And many Southeast Asians really do differentiate between these different measures. So you see high support for curfews and quite low support, but still about 1/3 of respondents, but nevertheless relatively low support for censoring the media, where these other questions is quite divided. The population is quite divided. If we show you, I'll show you the next slide. This is a bit complicated, but it breaks down those results by country. And you can see actually that support for authoritarian measures is actually quite strong in Indonesia, right? So, for example, we see among the highest support for censoring the media, 42% in Indonesia. It's quite close to Singapore, which is this classically authoritarian population. In particular, you can see that support for involving the military in government is especially strong in Indonesia at about 69%. Compare that, for example, with Thailand. So Indonesia and Thailand are two countries of Southeast Asia with a long history of military involvement in politics, of course. Thailand much more recently with the 2014 coup. You see much stronger rejection of military involvement in politics in Thailand than in Indonesia. So overall, I would say that this shows us that there is quite an appetite in response to the pandemic in the Indonesian public for authoritarian measures to be introduced. So sometimes we think of the Indonesian public as being highly democratic in its political outcome. This suggests that the pandemic is making many Indonesians be quite have some quite reservations about those sorts of democratic components of government. So if you see, we just added up here the net support, the total support for authoritarian measures by country. And you can see by far the strongest support actually was in Indonesia, even compared to Singapore and the Philippines. And Thailand was the least support, which is also very interesting given their recent history of military government. So some preliminary conclusions. It does seem to be the case that democratic recession or democratic regression is accelerating in Southeast Asia as a result of COVID-19. The key mechanism is this process of executive aggrandizement I mentioned before, this this response from the government, from the executive government to increase and consolidate and centralize its own power and to use the opportunity provided to COVID to do that. But we see very mixed results in terms of public attitudes and potential support for autocratization from below. We don't see blanket support. There is mixed support, but not blanket support for more authoritarian measures. Quite selective. So strong support for measures like curfews, much less for measures like censoring the media. And quite a lot of variation across countries. So Indonesia, in fact, looks like the least healthy country in this respect. And Thailand has the strongest support, at least amongst the middle class respondents of our survey. So I think we have a lot more work, a lot more research to do on this topic to explain these patterns, to look, for example, at the extent to which public support for authoritarian responses is a function of pandemic severity. When we've done some further analysis of these numbers, it does seem that, for example, people who said that they had a family member who died of COVID were much more supportive of authoritarian responses than other people. To what extent are demographic and political factors playing a result? Another possibility is just that poor handling, so poor management of a pandemic might give rise to disillusionment with the government, whether that government is authoritarian or democratic. So that's it. It's a very simple and very brief overview of what's quite a long paper, but I hope it will be able to stimulate some discussion later on. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing what the next speakers are going to say, especially my distinguished colleague, Dr. Azmil Tayeb. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Ed. Quite interesting presentation. I think we, from the Prof. Ed presentation, we got many information, especially about the political trend in Southeast Asia during amid the COVID-19 pandemics. As we know, COVID-19 pandemic has the great effect on democratic regression in some Southeast Asian countries, and I think this is a very important presentation because Prof. Edward Aspinall not only explained about the political trend in Southeast Asia, but give us more information about some future research agenda that we can do in Indonesia or in other countries in Southeast Asia. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move on the second speaker. The second speaker now is Bapak Azmil Tayeb, PhD. He is going to present with the title, a paper about the democratic regression and the configuration of coalitional politics in post-COVID-19 Malaysia. If Prof. Ed explained about the political trend and democratic regression in the COVID-19 era in the context of Southeast Asian countries, I think Mas Azmil Tayeb will explain specifically focus on the Malaysia. Before I give the time to Mas Azmil Tayeb, I usually call him Mas Azmil because the time we meet each other. I want to share to you about his short biography. Azmil Tayeb is currently a senior lecturer teaching political science at University of Science Malaysia in Penang, Malaysia. He has done extensive research on political Islam, social movement, and local government politics, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia. Previously, he was a Fulbright Fellow based at Pesantren in South Kalimantan, Indonesia, and Erasmus Mundus Fellow based at Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany. He received his PhD from Australian National University in 2016. He is the author of Islamic Education in Indonesia and Malaysia, Shaping Mind, Saving Souls. I think this book is produced from your PhD thesis, yeah, Mas Asmin?
Yes, yes. Under the supervision of Prof. Ed Espinal.
Oh, yeah. The book won the College's Choice Award from Social Science, yeah, at the 2019 International Convention of Asian Scholar in Leiden and Netherlands. Okay, Mas Asmil, time is yours.
Okay, terima kasih Mas Masun. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, can you guys see?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's okay. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for FISIP Win Wali Songo Semarang and the panitia for inviting me to this conference and to talk about and to share the Malaysian experience in the past 1.5 years dealing with the pandemic. I also wish that I'm in Semarang right now rather than doing this online. And the last time I was in Semarang was in 2008, actually. So that was a long while ago. So I do hope that I get to go to Semarang, maybe go to Lawang Sewu, to visit, soon. So so before I start, I think the Paet already mentioned a lot of the things that are happening in the region that we can see in the Malaysian case as well. So I think I will further elucidate and illustrate, in the Malaysian case, some of the mechanisms that Paet already mentioned in his presentation, especially some of the more authoritarian measures, and especially on how the government in power using the pandemic to further entrench its hold on to power and to avoid accountability. So, which we will see in the case of Malaysia. Okay. So here's a brief outline of the presentation today. So I think in order to understand what's going on politically in Malaysia right now, we have to go back about 3 years ago to 2018. For those of you who follow Malaysian politics, know that there is a big change in Malaysian politics after the 2018 election when the long-standing Barisan Nasional government, who had ruled Malaysia for 60 years, were voted out of power and then replaced with a new, the long-term opposition, the Pakatan Harapan government. So, so this is what some people call the new democratic dawn in Malaysia, the start of a Malaysia Baru. So you hear these terms being used, in 2018. So people were hopeful, right? There's only this is the furthest step in the democratization process in Malaysia. So maybe it's going against the trend that we see in Southeast Asia, where a lot of countries are actually regressing democratically, that we see in the Philippines and we see in Thailand and we see in Indonesia. So, but then we know then what happened. Yeah, so it was short-lived, right? So And then there comes a Sheraton move last year that actually overthrew the government, the PH government, and replaced it with another government that is more ethno-religious, the government that basically that Malaysia has right now. And also this government, because it came to power undemocratically, not through election and not through a vote of confidence in the parliament, it does not have a strong claim on a majority support. So because it has yet to prove that it has a majority support in the parliament. So it is, in a way, it's I would like to say illegitimate government because it has yet to, as we know in any democratic system, the legitimacy of the government, the majority has to be proven through a parliamentary vote, right? So this government has yet to subject itself to a vote of confidence in the parliament as of today. And also, finally, I will close this presentation with a speculation, I would say, about the future of coalitional politics that we see in Malaysia, because what has been happening in the past 1.5 years is sort of like a fragmentation of the status quo that we see in Malaysia, Malaysian politics, for the past few decades. So there is some reconfiguration, especially amongst the Malay electorates in Malaysia. And then I will just maybe give my opinion on what we can expect, at least in the next few years in Malaysia, at least until the next election, which is supposed to be by 2023. Okay. So let's move on to the first slide. So like I said, to better understand what's going on in Malaysia right now, especially in the past 1.5 years, when Malaysia has this political turmoils, right? We had 3 prime ministers actually within the past 1.5 years. It almost, it's like, usually you see these things maybe in Italy, for example, in countries where, where the government can be highly unstable. But in Malaysia, because if you remember, Mahathir Mohamad was the prime minister for 23 years, but in the past 1.5 years, we've had 3 prime ministers. So which is unheard of in Malaysia. But to understand what's going on right now, we have to go back to 2018, right after the election, the general election, which saw the fall of the 60-year rule of the Barisan Nasional UMNO regime. So for those of you who don't know what UMNO is a Malay nationalist right-wing party in Malaysia. So, which has ruled Malaysia for 60 years until it lost the election in 2018. And then this government was replaced by the Pakatan Harapan government, PH government, which is made up by Conservative Malay Nationalists Bersatu, which is an offshoot party from UMNO. So it was led by Mahathir, and then the one next to him, which is Muhyiddin Yassin, the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. And then also the secular and mainly non-Malays DAP, so Democratic Action Party. And then the more multi-ethnic and mainly urban political party, which is PKR, led by Anwar Ibrahim and his wife, who stands next to him in this picture. And then the Islamists, which is Amanah, so by the guy who's on the rightmost, the rightmost person in this picture. Amanah is also an offshoot party from PAS, which is the long-time Islamist party in Malaysia. So they broke away from PAS in 2015 actually. No, yeah. So you can see this coalition that came to power in 2018 is very I see it's more like an alliance of convenience. And so there is no shared ideology between these component parties that made up Pakatan Harapan. So the reason that they managed to win the election is because there's such hatred against the former government. So the anti-UMNO vote, that managed to help them to win, to Pakatan Harapan to win the election. So in the 22 months when Pakatan Harapan was in power, there was a mixed record of reforms, because of course they came to power with such high expectation to carry out reforms. But then, as we all know, I think Indonesia can also empathize with this, that the campaigning on reform is a whole different thing than actually governing and try to implement reforms when you're actually in power. It's a two separate thing, and it's so much more difficult to implement reforms when you're actually in power. So there are a lot of infighting because, as you can see, this is a very eclectic mix composition of parties, within, so there's no ideology that tie them all together. So there's a lot of infighting, fighting for power. And also there's a galvanized right-wing ethno-religious groups mobilizing against this government, in these 22 months, so there were almost every month, I can remember, there were some kind of ethno-religious crisis going on, something about, Islam being insulted, Malay being insulted, and things like that, so the ethno-religious issues are actually the weak spot for the Pakatan Harapan government. Yeah? As you can see later on, because it feeds into this psyche of Malay Islam insecurity, which I will show you. Actually, I'm not able to. Okay, there you go. So we can see here in 22 months that Pakatan Harapan government was in power, there was this kind of insecurity among the Malay Muslims that the non-Malays and the non-Muslims were gaining more power. And there was this fear, however irrational it was, that the non-Malays are finally taking over the country or asking for same status with the Malays and Muslims, right? So and this composition actually, like you can see in this graph, shows the kind of insecurity, because it's a reflection of that kind of insecurity. Because when you look at the number of parliamentary seats versus the number of cabinet posts, that each of the component parties had, is not proportional, right? Because when you look at Bersatu, which is the Malay nationalist, conservative party, having only 13 parliamentary seats, but with 12 cabinet posts, right? And Amanah, the Islamist political party, has 11 parliamentary seats, but then 10, cabinet posts, and compared to these two other parties, which is, have huge number of parliamentary seats, but, almost the same as, the number of cabinet posts with the other two more conservative parties. So this is a reflection of that kind of Malay Islam insecurity, you see. Okay, so, and then the Sheraton move happened. So what, as I mentioned earlier, ethno-religious controversies that happened, was part of this mobilization of right-wing ethno-religious groups, and also UMNO and PAS, because they saw an opportunity in exploiting, ethno-religious issues to destabilize the PH government, and then which led to a backdoor bargaining in a Sheraton hotel. So that's why it's called Langkah Sheraton, Sheraton move, which then led to the downfall of the PH government in late February. So on 1st March, a new government was established, came to power, and then with also a new prime minister at the time, Muhyiddin Yassin. So, and then this new government is a reflection of that ethno-religious mobilizations that we see in the 22 months of Pakatan Harapan government in power. It's predominantly Malay Muslim, especially for PAS, for the first time, this Islamist political party had joined the federal government, because they were always being sidelined, so this is for the first time they were part of a federal government. So it's a predominantly Malay Muslim, and then because this is a government that came to power undemocratically, and there's no clear majority support. What they try to do to shore up the support is to induce party hopping at the federal and state levels. So they entice, seduce, MPs to join their coalition by giving them various incentives. So which I will go more in the next slide. And also they engineered the downfall of several state governments that were controlled by PH. So through party hopping as well, because some of the state government have where PH has had slim majority. So they managed to convince some of the state legislators to switch sides, which then led to the downfall of the PH government at the state level. And not surprisingly, when PN came to power, suddenly all the ethno-religious controversies that flared up during the 22 months of the PH government rule disappeared. Right? So suddenly there's no more, the insult against Islam, insult against Malays, insult against the kings, and all these things that were exploited during the 22 months of PH rule. They all disappeared now, for magically for some reason. So, in what ways that democracy regressed, during this pandemic, right? As Pa Ed has mentioned earlier, so. The executive and in this case the government used the pandemic as a pretext, right, to aggrandize their power. And in the case of Malaysia, it's not just the aggrandizement of the executive branch, but also the expansion of the role and the authority of the king, which I will get into in a bit. So the first thing that happens is that, like, as I mentioned, this government lacks clear majority support, right? I mean, it has not been able to prove its majority support in the parliament. It has been trying to avoid parliamentary seating since it came to power because it is afraid of vote of confidence. So what it tries to do is to buy support. Right, so the first thing that it did was to expand the cabinet, right? So to have more cabinet minister and deputy ministers as a way to gain support from other political parties, right? So during the Pakatan Harapan government, there were 55 cabinet posts, ministers and deputy ministers. But when PN came to power, the cabinet expanded to 70 ministers and deputy ministers. So it's a bloated cabinet with ministers and especially deputy ministers that have no function whatsoever, other than a drain on taxpayers' money, obviously. And then also the appointment to GLC, which is a government-led companies, or in Indonesia, you call the Badan Usaha Milik Negara, or Perusahaan Plat Merah, right? So the government uses this appointment to gain support as well. And also what it did to avoid parliamentary scrutiny is by appointing speaker, parliamentary speaker, and parliamentary deputy speakers that are pliant. That,
Hello?
yeah. Yes?
You have 5 minutes again.
Oh, okay, all right, almost done. So you can see this what happened. You know, it limits the number of parliamentary sitting in the past 1.5 years. The government has only met 3 times in the past. The parliament has met 3 times actually in the past 1.5 years. And then the Sabah election happened on the 26th September last year, when the government tried to engineer the takeover of the Sabah state government, but then, but after that, there was a spike of COVID-19 cases in Malaysia, because when people out campaigning for the election, no social distancing, observing any of these protocols, and then you can see the high number of cases rose up, and the government actually tried to use that, the spike in the number of cases, to call for a state of emergency on the 23rd of October, but it failed because the king did not approve of the state of emergency at that time. But then they say, okay, the government still need to convene the parliament, but then there will not be any vote of confidence. You know, so this is what the king asked the parliament. You know, said not to have a vote of confidence. So which the parliament obeyed. So finally, we have a state of emergency in early 2021 this year. But this is a weird state of emergency because, you know, it's not, we don't have military on the ground. You know, it's just basically a suspension of all political activities, especially suspension of the parliament. So everything else is normal in Malaysia, you know, except that the parliament did not meet, or is not able to meet because of the emergency. So we can see that the reason for the state of emergency is not to combat the pandemic, as the government claimed, but it is actually used to suppress any opposition, to avoid accountability, you know, and to avoid vote of confidence in the parliament. So, and then the expanded role and authority of the king, which is actually, this is a hallmark of the Malaysian politics in the past 1.5 years, because the king has the power to appoint the prime minister, right? I mean, but previously the power is ceremonial. You know, it's a formality. After the prime minister has been chosen by the majority support in the parliament, the king just put his stamp on it. Yeah, but since the parliament is not able to convene, now the king has more power to appoint the prime minister, which the government has been able to exploit. So, and it is clearly undemocratic. And then finally, you have the wave of xenophobia against refugees and migrant workers, because you need to find ways to distract the population from whatever current issues that the country is facing, you know, and one way to do that is to direct that kind of anger, frustration, fear, insecurity towards, you know, these vulnerable groups that cannot defend themselves. So finally, so what do we make of this? You know, so as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, the Malay electorates are actually highly fragmented and non-Muslim. You know, so, and some of the parties are actually having more power now because they can play the kingmaker like past Islamist party and also Borneo parties. And what happened also recently in the past few days is there is an MOU between the opposition and the government as well, because it's one way to maybe to stabilize the government. And go to the Q&A sessions afterwards. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mas Asmil, about your interesting presentation. I think Mas Asmil have been explaining about the democratic regulation amid the COVID-19 pandemics. I think, like in Indonesian government, I think in the admin of COVID-19, the rule and the authority of the government or the king in Malaysia become more expanding beyond the ceremonial duties. And then Mas Admin explained about the fragmentation of the Malay electorate, and then pandemic, I think, make the rise and the return of the ethno-religious in Malaysia. And democratic regression, I think, in the some countries in Southeast Asia has been happening in before COVID-19, but then in the COVID-19 pandemics, has the great effect in accelerating the political trend, and the conduct of Malaysia also has the effect on the configuration of political party coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, in the session of presentation from by the speaker, I think you can post some question in the chat room, and then after the finish the presentation, we will pause, or I will select some question to answer by the question. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the next session in the okay, to the third speaker, Prof. Andi Fefta Wijaya. Hello, Prof. Andi. Hello. Okay.
Yep. Hello.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Andi, for your participating with us. And now it's time for yours. But before I give the time to the Prof. Andi Fefta Wijaya, I would like share his short biography. Prof. Andi Fefta Wijaya is a professor and the Dean of Faculty of Administration, Science at the University of Brawijaya. He is also the head of Fordekis, Forum Dekan Ilmu Sosial Indonesia. He received his PhD from Flinders University, Adelaide, Australia in 2006. His teaching and research interests include management of public policy theories, governance, and administration reform. And now, Prof. Andi Fefta Wijaya is going to discuss about the Indonesian public policies in managing pandemic of COVID-19. If the two speakers before explaining about the political trend and democratic regression in the admin COVID-19 in the context of Southeast ASEAN and Malaysia, now we have this speaker will focus talking about the Indonesian politics and democracy in the COVID-19 era. Okay, Prof. Andi, time is yours.
Baik. Okay, let me start. Just a minute, please. Yeah. Let me share my. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, let me set my PowerPoint. Okay, thank you everybody. I would like to present the topic about Indonesian public policy in managing pandemic COVID-19. Before that, I would like to thanks to the event organizer to arrange this very important conference, yeah, and also to all keynote speaker and also all audience who come today. Talking about this theme, I would like to mention about my theoretical standing position in this aspect, and then after that presenting some data about Indonesia dealing with COVID, and then in the last I give conclusion, kind of analysis to the case. Yeah. So talking about the public administration paradigm, yeah, we know that we have three big paradigm: old public administration, new public management, and new public governance, atau sometimes we just call it governance. Yeah. So as you know, the paradigm now try every country to struggle, yeah, to move from old public administration to new public management, or MPM, and governance, especially in the developing countries, yeah. And we see that in Indonesia also the two latest paradigm already developed, yeah, and public policy also as a part of core discourses in the NPM, also governance paradigm of public administration. So especially public governance consists from 5 distinct, and we see in terms of social political governance, yeah, in terms of public policy governance, in terms of administrative governance, contract governance, and network governance. So we see here in the second part the public policy governance concerned with how policy elites and network interact to create and govern the public processes. And then good governance also, this is just short description that this is the early beginning of this paradigm. Yeah, we know the good governance very popular at that time in the introduction of this paradigm, but now they already developed. Yeah, we have many kind of approach in the governance, including pentahelic governance, yeah, multi-helic governance, and also the other, like the most popular one to my postgraduate student, usually about collaborative governance. I think I already as a supervised, yeah, 3 dissertation dealing with collaborative governance. It's quite popular, but now some of them move to another approach, yeah, in the governance. So talking about governance, yeah, especially about participation in here, we want to look at, yeah, the particularly pressure of accountability is built up on decision maker to respond to the need and preference of the citizens. So in this case, we want to know if public policy really touch or really connected, yeah, to the needs and preference of the citizen. In this case, we also want to look, yeah, whether the government policy 19 also answer the need and preference of the citizen in Indonesia. So that's why this is also, yeah, represent consideration is considered the most vulnerable. In this case, those people who are get more vulnerable impact in terms of COVID-19. Yeah. So all of what is the implication and the problem, livelihood and quality of life of the people, yeah, and also government. Yeah. So this is sort of a theoretical discussion when we talk about the marginal policy rules, yeah, in coordinating, directing, overseeing. So in this case, in Indonesia, as we know, the coordination function is given to the one coordinating minister, yeah, Minister Marine and Investment. Now in charge, yeah, to handle the problem of COVID, especially to strategy dealing with strategic gap, yeah, to look at what is the problem in the society. And also when we talk about policy, we also see inclusive policy, who the policy provide, yeah, such as those who have physical and mental disabilities and member of other minorities. Yeah, introduce what we call a new normal, a state to which an economic society etc. settle following a crisis. Yeah, when this differ from situation that prevail prior to the start of the crisis. So it's mean that new normal, some condition or situation that we have because of the COVID pandemic. So we cannot go back again. We hardly go back to the previous situation. And also in this situation, we also have what we call it infodemic. We get many kind of info, yeah, because of this pandemic, pro and contra, and sometimes yeah, to all citizens offline, including wrong information, misinformation, and disinformation about virus corona transmission and handling. Yeah, for example, about vaccine, yeah, some info mentioned the vaccine cause problem of or something like that. Yeah. So this is what we call it infodemic. Yeah, the situation make the society also confused about whether to get to receive a vaccine or not. This is the condition in Indonesia. We talk about the data. Yeah. The case in Indonesia, the latest, yeah, we see of the case of COVID achieved more than 4 million cases in Indonesia, yeah. But the number of rapid situation, and in terms of the last in this month, yeah, which we see from the beginning of this month, the number tend to decrease, yeah. This is because of the number of people get vaccine in Indonesia increase time by time, and then after because of the PPKM policy, it seemed that getting better in the implementation, so push the number of cases and also death becoming decrease. Yeah, we can look from the data here. Yeah, start in the beginning of this month. It is about on 8,955. Yeah, in 2 September 2021. This is new cases. Yeah, in this day. Then after that can keep down, yeah, until in 13/9/2021 is 2,557, and then up again, yeah, in yesterday, yeah. But now, the graphic tend to decrease, yeah. And the new death also tend to decrease. Yeah, we can see here from 680 go down until 250. So it's mean that the condition becoming better. And then we see because of the COVID situation, this is the portrait of the condition in Indonesia. Yeah, as we see economic growth recovery. Now we look here, the very hard time that we have is in the second quarter of 2020, when the economic growth go to the minus 5.32. Now this is what happened in the second quarter 2020 last year. Yeah, start go down in the 2019, yeah, and then in the first quarter of 2020, yeah, this is 2.97. This is still positive in the first quarter, but the second quarter already jumped into negative economic growth. Yeah, then become minus 3.59 in the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter become minus 2.19. The first quarter of 2021 minus 0.74, yeah, becoming better, and fortunately in the second quarter 2021, yeah, this is already 7.07 growth. So this is better than we checked in 2018 or 19. Yeah. So it's mean that the economic growth become this is the recovery time. Yeah. The growth and the economic growth becoming better. Yeah. And we see also another impact. Yeah. Poverty goes up. Yeah. As we see here, the situation in 2020 and March 2021, the data show the poverty goes up, yeah, become 10%, yeah, from the total population, yeah. And then this is the number, yeah, we can see here, yeah, the number is almost similar to the situation in the 2016, yeah, and 2017. So because of pandemic, it's mean that all effort that we have been done in 2018, 2019, now because on pandemic becoming becoming escalate again, yeah, the number of poverty. Okay. Yeah. And this is unemployment also increased, yeah, until August 2001, yeah, still 7.35. This is also we can feel, yeah, the unemployment situation because of this pandemic still a huge problem here. And criminality also goes up, yeah, 5%, increasing from the first week to the second week 2021, yeah. And tax also income goes down, and we know that going down per July 2020 on 14.7% compared to 2020 the same period. So it's mean we cannot achieve the target. Tax income only achieve 30.94%. Yeah. 374.6 trillion from the total target 1,229.6 trillion per April 2021. So we still have a big target that we need to achieve, yeah, in terms of tax. And this is also influencing the capability of our capacity of our government to finance the COVID pandemic and the recovery process. So that's why we look what the government do, yeah. So because of the national budget deficit, yeah, and we see here the figure, yeah, deficit in 2020 and 2001, deficit becoming higher, yeah, minus 6.34 in 2020 and minus 5.7 in 2021. So it's mean this pandemic also give very huge impact in our national budget deficit. And then the total debt also becoming increased to cover it because of the deficit. So the government try to cover it by debt atau hutang luar negeri, ya. Nah, hutang itu bisa di dalam negeri ataupun di luar negeri. Nah, as we see here, per June 2021, our debt already 6,554 trillion. This is our hutang, ya, our debt, ya. And then if we compare to the previous year, yeah, in 2019, in 2020, this is there is improvement, yeah. Actually, the improvement we see in October also we already have a pandemic start from 2020 to 2021. So that's why the government give alternative by looking to the debt as way out also to handle the COVID situation. Nah, we know that in the term of community, also there is a community behavior change. Yeah, and now the people are becoming aware about health and clean lifestyle. Yeah, and they try to follow up the procedure. Yeah, even though in some area, some districts, especially in the rural area, uh, at the early policy implementation, they cannot accept this policy. But now some of them, maybe not all of them, where the health and clean lifestyle is very important, and social distance also we keep in social distance. Until now, our university still do daring system in terms of education. Physical distance. We also have physical distance, avoiding a crowded situation. This is what the community behavior change now, and also industry and business sector down and job loss in general. Some other business goes up, but to compare to the all business sector, generally they go down. But some business they get a good situation in terms of their business, especially who correlated to the online business. Now people, many community use online business to buy something or anything. And also IT in internet are increasingly used. Before we are not very familiar, 2019 and before 2018, we're not very familiar with Zoom, Google Meet and others, and actually this kind of facility already exists there for many years, but now become popular for us, and we use it for education, training, meet mice, online shopping, family gathering and ceremony, conference, seminar, and etc. And other impact like cancellation, sport and tournament, cancellation and avoiding traveling nationally and internationally, disruption of celebration of a family, cultural, religious, and festival event, closing or limited opening of public facilities, malls, hotel, restaurant, religious places, entertainment places, they close it. And policy response in the case of Indonesia. So in the beginning, we have presidential decree number 7 of 13 March 2020 concerning the task force for accelerating of handling of coronavirus disease 2019. And then after that, the latest one, we have what we call it instruction from the Minister of Internal Affairs, number 39 of 2021, the implementation of level 4, 3, and 2 community restriction, PPKM, we call it emergency public activity restriction. And now extend the minister, the coordinating minister of investment and merit, who are in charge in this PPKM, try to extend many times until now, extend until 20 September 2021. But later there will be another announcement. This will be extended again or not, because already several times this is the extension of the PPKM. But we look this kind of policy, because they can keep down the number of COVID, the COVID case, and also we can see also the other figure like that and others, So it's mean that this is fairly enough, effective, to handle the current situation. This is some good policy response in Indonesia. Yeah. Color area zone system, we do it before, and now we leveling by 1, 2, 3, 4. It means that if we get our area number 1, so it means we can do luring system, face-to-face meeting or other, yeah. And but if we still in the level of 4 or 3, yeah, we especially 4, we are not low, yeah, to do luring system. So this is to control virus transmission and risk. Yeah. And then second, increasing virus testing laboratories and recommended hospitals. Third, domestic production of health personal protective equipment, APD. Four, domestic production of ventilator. 5, domestic production of high quality of face masks. And 6, domestic production of white rat vaccine in consortium collaboration with HMAN and Bio Farma.
Okay.
And how about the policy budget?
Hello?
And we see priorities of national budget in pandemic atmosphere, yeah, keeping the quality of public health and safety, social safety net for vulnerable people, and protecting our business activity, and also supporting both micro and macro economy. So total budget allocated for combating the pandemic is 677.2 trillion rupiah. And for health sector,
Andy? Hello?
yes, yeah.
You have 2 minutes again.
Okay. I try to speed up my presentation. And this is a state budget for handling COVID-19 and the national economic recovery. Yeah, from healthcare. Yeah, this is from social protection. Yeah, healthcare 75 trillion, social protection 110 trillion, and this is the allocation. And then tax incentive and credit for business 70 trillion, stimulus for SMA, small and medium enterprise, yeah, 123 trillion, stimulus for SON corporation 53, support for minister and regional administration 106 trillion. And then if we see at the beginning slow policy implementation, national economic recovery atau pemulihan ekonomi nasional per 1 October 2020 just executed 316 trillion rupiah, or 55% from the total budget at the total that we provide. Yeah. So this is also quite a big issue. Criticize why so slow to deliver the policy. And then also there are some questions about misallocation and distribution of the budget, mistarget group, inclusive target group, and marginalized people. And economic recovery as the Indonesian government priority in the first response. So it means that the government prioritize economic recovery in the first strategy. But now we look, they already prioritize the health first priority. So that's why we keep down the number of academics. So I see this is the strategy that not very effective at the beginning, because they still look at how the economic recovery at the first time, and then becoming confusing to implement the policy. And yeah, we keep. Now this is about the governance, the good governance performance and collaborative governance. And we see in the current situation, we really need collaboration between not only government, society, private sector, but also academia, university, media, and others, yeah, to combat pandemic, to solve this problem. And we see that in collaborative and inclusive policy process, we have what we call it pentahelic, multi-helic model to enhance performance, yeah, to handle this, yeah. How the 5 sector or more, yeah, sector to work each other, yeah, to solve the problem. I see there is still homework in the policy implementation that we need to boost, yeah, multi-helic and pentahelic model in this case, yeah. Yeah, and at the beginning, this is not really work in the first situation. So I think my time is already already end, yeah. So I would like to give my presentation to the moderator. Thank you for your time. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Prof. Andi Wijaya, for your very interesting presentation. I think from the Prof. Andi Wijaya presentation, we got many information from the disinformation and misinformation about the COVID-19 in the media, virtual or non-virtual, and then Prof. Andi Wijaya has been explaining about the trend of COVID-19 cases in Indonesia from 2020 to 2021, and then explain the effect of COVID-19 on economics. Yeah, very comprehensive explanation about the COVID-19 effect in Indonesia. Yeah, COVID-19 has affected on economic, social order, and lifestyle, and Indonesian culture, I think, in everyday life. And then very interesting is Prof. Andi Wijaya also gave us about the framework or paradigm how to understand about the public policy or the government in dealing COVID-19 in Indonesia. In the last presentation, Prof. Andi explained what should be done by the government, Indonesian government, in handling COVID-19. I think this was very good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move on to the fourth speaker. This is ladies and the only woman speaker from Universitas Indonesia, Bu Husnul Mariah. Halo, Bu Husnul. Okay. Welcome, Bu Husnul. Thank you so much for your participating with us. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I give the time to Bu Husnul Mariah, I would like to share her short biography. Bu Husnul Mariah received a PhD in politics from the University of Sydney, Australia. In 1998, she is the first woman who got PhD in political science in Indonesia. Was very wonderful and amazing. Let's give applause, big applause from her to her. She is a lecturer at the Department of Political Science at the University of Indonesia. She is now director of the Center for Election and Political Party, FISIP, Universitas Indonesia, 2012 till 2020. CEPP University Link has 40 members of Indonesia, including Sakuraba and including FISIP Winwali Songo, I think. Okay.
Yes,
I think so many books and book chapter and international journal article has been publishing by Ibu Husnul Mariah. Okay, I directly give the time
Thank you.
To Bu Husnul Mariah. Let's give a big applause to her. Okay, Ibu Husnul Mariah, time is yours.
Thank you, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Pak Maksun. Luar biasa, Wali Songo. Tepuk tangan nih. To all the distinguished speakers, all the participation, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very delighted and thank you for visit Universitas Wali Songo. Keren ya. And all the speakers, former speakers already discussed about COVID and some on politics with comparative studies, ASEAN and also from Malaysia, and my colleague from University of Brawijaya, Pak Andi, is already gave a lot of inside story. So, and also very valuable for our understanding about what's going on during the pandemic COVID-19 and what's the government policy and so on and so forth. But my thesis, not thesis, yeah, my thesis of my article about, I would like to talk about the legitimacy conflict in Indonesian democracy, especially the awakening of the civil Islam post 411 and 212. So it's not directly during the COVID, but prior to COVID, we already have the political situation. Um, if you're talking about Indonesian history, usually I always ask my student, how long Indonesia under the Dutch colonialization? They always answer 350 years. I said, really? When Indonesia got the independence? 17 August of 1945. And what's before independence? What sovereignties we had in Indonesian land from Aceh to Tidore? We call it this like 100 of sultanate, Islamic kingdom from Aceh till Tidore. And, the Tidore kingdom is until, if you are talking about the territory until the Papua, Sorong, Manokwari, Fak was part of the Tidore kingdom. It is very important to discuss about that when I would like to write, I would like to explain about the Islamic, I call it civil Islam, because if you are talking about political Islam, then, well, only just a few percent of member of parliament who we call it from the Islamic, usually call it Islamic political parties, but usually you call it Islamist, something like that. So the problem is, when the problem with Islamic civil Islam in Indonesia during the last how many years now from the Joko Widodo periods, we have a different issue in terms of the talking about the Islam. Suddenly there is a lecture talking about, state gives statement. One of the indicators is you are terrorist or Taliban because you're using Arabic language, And she's actually is very powerful because she is a lecturer from Defense University, the only university of defense in Indonesia for the moment, something like that. And again, when you are demonstration and using a word like Allahu Akbar, suddenly you are considered as a terrorist or radical or something like that. So this is also the problem, that how we read, how we explain about what's going on about Islam and politics, Islam and civil society in Indonesia. So if you're talking about it, that's what I would like to talk about in 50 minutes, Pak Maksud. Usually I use that this definition from Linz Lipset and Barry Diamond. If you're talking about democracy, because it's very easy, you can implement, you can use this variable easily to understand actually what democracy is about. In democracy, you have to have competition. In the competition, excluding the use of force. So that's why if you use like the police, the intelligence bureau, the military, so we are questioning, what's democracy if you use this one to dismiss to, especially for the opposition, because democracy doesn't work without the participation of the opposition of its citizen, That's the second thing, full participation. There is no discrimination and that full participation. So usually I use this definition to increase women participation, including the quota of the 30% of women. Use this definition. If you really would like to have democracy, so then you should have women in decision-making process, not only just the politics of ideas, but also the politic of presence. So that's why since 1999, after the Reformation, we have the regulation that the member of parliament should have at least in election 30% of the quota of the candidate of they are women. The third thing, this is that's mostly that I would like to discuss. It's about the civil and political liberties, the freedom of organization, the freedom of press, the freedom of expression that I think we have suffered more, especially for the who are in the opposition, who are using the Islamic identity. Suddenly, when you are using Islamic identity, you are not allowed to use the identity, something like that. Suddenly the regime use jargon like political jargon like saya Pancasila, saya Bhinneka, saya toleran, something like that. Means that you are not Pancasila, you are not Bhinneka, you are not pluralist, and you are not tolerant. So this one, and also this one, if you are talking about tolerant and something like that, that's supported by the research by the Bapanas, because I was the research viewers to review research reviewers for Bapanas, and I said, oh yeah, you would like to say that Jakarta is not tolerant because of the civil Islam demonstration of 411 and 212, and NTT is most tolerant about that. Even though I haven't did yet the report of the research, but actually that's the conclusion. So I said, come on. And they said, well, how come that you understand, you know the research? Yes, I just asked who paid the research. What variable that you ask to the people? And I said, it's much better if the, because there is conflict between, the palace Medan Merdeka, the North Medan Merdeka, and the South of Medan Merdeka in Monas. So this is also the issues we have now. Prior to, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, if you're talking about Indonesian in terms of, the variables, so it's not only just the issues of COVID. If you're talking about politics, Pak Andi already mentioned about so many indicators. But actually, if you're talking about the condition of political economy, we have the tax shortfall up to 246 trillion. So that's why we increase, our debt, especially the foreign debt. If you're talking about how the Reserve Bank, the Indonesian Bank Indonesia, already gave intervention until up to 100 trillion, but not to bring the rupiah become strong. Even though it's already put money in it, but rupiah is still very big. The downfall of devisa, the World Bank stated statement Indonesia is lack of credibility, uncertainty, even though, there is some statement that Indonesia now increased the rank of the class from emerging market to developed country. The president always proud that we are now in G20, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, the value added, the crowding out effect, all this value added brought because of the debt, of foreign debt. So the crowding out effect is brought overseas. And the downfall of the oil price and the increase of the poverty of poor people in Indonesia. And the problem with the poverty, because the what is called the picture of poverty, I call it feminization of poverty. That's a picture of women and children, and it's very good because Pak Andi also put the picture of women, and then the issues of COVID. So actually, it's so many issues that we have during the pandemic. So COVID actually is used by the regime to strengthen their power, to maintain their power, interlocking to maintain their power in 2024 with all they have the power they use. So if you're talking about the civil Islam, I'm really more talking about the civil Islam rather than the political Islam, even though, like the what is new political party like Masumi, Ribon, New Masumi and also Partai Umat. That's Professor Amin Rais just start with the Partai Umat, and also Gelora is it from Gelora from the PKS. It's not divided into Partai Gelora, something like that. But still, because they are not in power yet, so it's not a very strong issues in terms of during the what is called like the pandemic, during the pandemic. Yeah. If you are talking about the civil Islam in Indonesia, so many issues. The basic question is about what is the ulil amri in Islamic teaching. So about the leadership. So this is the issues. This one is bring the issue of Al-Ma'idah 51. During the Ahok governor of Jakarta, and then the Pilkada afterwards, and Ahok lose in the regional election, and then all these issues of 411 and 212 become one of the model of the civil Islam that I call it, even though many of us considered this is like radical and something like that. And then after the regional election, we have 2019 election. So the phenomenon of non-parliamentary opposition very strong with Habib Rizik issues, with using leadership after 212, 411 and 212, and then they have like Ijtima Ulama, and then Relawan Ganti Presiden, the voluntary group to change the government. So this is also the new phenomenon in the Indonesian politics, especially for civil Islam, because it's not the Muhammadiyah and who use the dominant group, but this is like everyone can, even though they call it a FPI, Front Pembela Islam, but actually many of us is really from Muhammadiyah, from NU, but got together. I think because of religious call when issues of Al-Ma'idah 51. But the problem with so this one, I like this picture. Why? Because when I give training for Bintek, for member of parliament, regional member of parliament, DPRD, provinsi and kabupaten kota, from the minister for domestic affairs. When one of them asked me about the relationship between religion and politics, then I used this picture, and then he took my picture because the picture, and they put it in his Twitter. They said this is Kementerian Dalam Negeri, what he called Kementerian Dalam Negeri kecolongan, orang seperti ini dijadikan dosen kayak gitu ya. Padahal I already be lectures and election for 7 years, at that moment. So I quite understand about what's going on in politics, something like that. So this is also the issues. Then finally, we have like election with a divided nation, especially the presidential election, because Prabowo supported by Ijtima Ulama and very few political parties, and the incumbent got a lot of political party supporters. So the incumbent loyalists using still the jargon, saya Pancasila, saya Bhinneka, intoleransi become very, very the most issues at that moment. So and the election dispute brought into constitutional court. But what happened before the constitution gave decision? Actually, there was quite a lot of demonstration, series of demonstration, and one of them is the tragedy. We call it tragedy May 21st and 22nd, because 10 people were shot and killed, and 3 of them still very young, 15 years old, and more than 500 demonstrators at that moment were in detain, including 25 satpam from Sarinah Mall. So it's very, but there is no any single condolences, there is no any single what's really going on with the 10 people, the citizens of this republic was sought at that moment. Was sought because of by the police actually, and only just what this guy call it, selempar batu from the palace on the edges, something like that. But there is no any single what is called like a condolences or so on, except from Anies, the governor of Jakarta. And then Constitutional Court didn't make any decision about the TSM terstruktur masif dan systemic at that moment, because as an incumbent they can use all these apparatus to to support and to make the incumbent win in the election, and to use for money politics and to use policy into that one, like money politics, like in Semarang they call it pebotoh, and this one is the thesis of former lecturer from Undip, former chair of election commissioners from Central Java, Ibu Fitria, and her thesis is about the money politics, call it pebotoh, in Jawa Tengah, in Central Java. And what happened, finally, Constitutional Court only just gave to Bawaslu, the scrutiny institution, and case closed, especially after Prabowo joined to the government as a minister for defense, and later on Sandiaga Uno joined as appointed as a minister for tourism. So this is I don't know whether all this theory that we use, or the imported theory from the West, can use to read that situation. But again, this is the way how the regime use all this opposition and become like we call it in Indonesia tahta harta, something like that. I don't like to use wanita, usually just tahta harta and sex, something like that. If you would like to get a loyal opposition and become loyal supporter. So post-election, how do they rule? If you are talking about legitimacy, during pandemic, some political conflict related to civil Islam, higher aspect from Mecca, after as a like a not really refugee, but finally he came back as a symbol of opposition, but non-parliamentary opposition, because parliaments, most of them supported the regime, maybe only just PKS and individual from different party. And what happened afterward, because of the wedding ceremony and because of the issue, this one came into the COVID issues, and HRS were in Umi Hospital in Bogor, and he was reported by the mayor of Bogor, and because he didn't declare he was positive COVID. So all this court cases until six Laskar of FBI were killed in tragedy of kilometer 50, bukan 15. And then FBI dismissed. If you're talking about democracy is the freedom of to organize in civil society, but FBI dismissed. And HRS was jailed because of he didn't declare positive COVID. He got 4 years in jail. So if you're talking about discrimination and so on and so forth, this is what happened in my country, in my beloved country. The regime used control mechanism to ensure obedience by enforcing political loyalty and policy implementation, including using the buzzer. Even though they always say, no, but I said this is, hawks and buzzer. The best hawks and buzzer were set up by the government because they have everything, Policies of COVID-19 regulation until issues of vaccine. Actually, people believe in COVID. So usually,
hello, you have 2 minutes again.
Okay. So this is the parties, and where is the Islamic parties only, and compare this 55 and how democracy works. If you're talking about democracy work, that's the liberal Machiavellian election, is far from the free and fair election. If you're talking the election, the unholy alliances of three oligarchy, political, economic, and social, if Pak Andi talking about how to spend the funding, the budget for COVID, actually is mostly for the oligarchy at that moment. The issue of migrant, especially from China, also that's happened. We have at that moment. But in terms of global politics, issue of this is a contestation between Poros Jakarta Beijing and Poros Washington. So legitimacy is in conflict. Sorry, legitimacy is in conflict. The process, the regulation of COVID, regulation of the bill of Pancasila, RUHIP, the Omnibus Law, the policy of pandemic for TKA, and so on is the proof of how the government used the COVID for their own profit. So is democracy on the right track? So we have a still weak rule of law, corruption is still there, poor economic performance, weak ineffective political parties. So we still have a problem. Especially we have a problem of leadership in this country. So the awakening of civil Islam, Islamic teaching believes there is no separation between state and church. So this is usually this is the discourse that we have, because they're always saying we have to have separation between you are not allowed using religion in politics, but actually in Islamic thesis, Islamic teaching, there is no separation between state and church, state and religion. So in conclusion, Islam and democracy is actually compatible if we understand about the value. But what kind of democracy? Not this kind of democracy with a liberal democracy with market-centered paradigm, tapi we have to, what I call it, to have a model with an Indonesian point of view. There's a wrong claim that Islam is not Bhinneka, not Pancasila, and so on and so on, because the future of politics is part of the Islamic value, like justice, humanity, tolerance, civilized, and peace, and have to be the moral ethics in political life. So, in conclude, Islamic politics is always and will be the picture in Indonesian politics, because Pancasila is also Islamic values. Therefore, the separation between state and religion doesn't work in Indonesian democracy. So thank you very much for listening my presentation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Maksum.
Okay.
Pak Maksum.
Thank you very much, Ibu Husnul Maria, for your presentation. I think it's very interesting and wonderful presentation. From Ibu Husnul Maria, we got so many information about what's going on about Indonesian democracy today. Ibu Husnul Maria actually explained about the challenges and the problem faced by Indonesian government in nowadays or in the regime today. And from her explanation, we can get information about how oligarchy power injected the economic system in Indonesia, and about the problem legitimacy conflict in Indonesian democracy. Civil Islam and political Islam have become awakening in nowadays politics. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like friendly remind you that if everyone in the Zoom meeting or in this room offline, if you have some question, please you can post the question in chat room, and then we are going to move on the last speaker. Okay, the last speaker is a doctor, associate professor, Dr. Muhyar Fanani. Pak Muhyar is going to talk about the MUI, Majelis Ulama Indonesia pieces in the COVID-19 mitigation in Indonesia, political philosophy study. I think this theme related with the Ibu Husnul Maria presentation. Before I give the time to Pak Muhyar Fanani, I would like to read his short biography. Pak Muhyar, I think, was born in Ngawi, in 1973. He is a former of the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science. He has a course study on the philosophy and Islamic politics and democracy and fikih. And it is the langit, the heaven sign. Okay, his education start from the undergraduate until the PhD program in UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta. I think I don't want to explain about his biography because of he is very popular, especially in UIN Wali Songo in Indonesia. Okay, Pak Muhyar, time is yours. You just have 15 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Pak Maksun, for this opportunity. Distinguished speaker, prominent scholar who joined this seminar as speakers from Australia, Pak Aspinal, Bu Husnul Mariyah. We hope in healthy, Bu, and also Mas Azmi from Malaysia, and all of participants in this room and in Zoom meeting. First of all, I would like to thank to Budekan, Budin. Whenever I visit Visip is my mantan. I saw that my mantan is getting more beauty than before, so make me very glad when Pak Mason called me to join this seminar. I was very proud to come and present my last research. Continuing Bu Husnul speaking, I will talk about the civil society and democracy. I choose MUI, the Council of Ulama in Indonesia, as my topic because actually I'm not interested to MUI before 2007. In 2007, I met one of environmental activists from England, Mr. Fazlun Khalid. He told me that he was very proud to MUI, the Council of Indonesian Ulama. Why? Because in the eyes of environmental activists, only MUI who produced one fatwa related to illegal logging. That illegal logging in all over the world were prohibited and haram to do, and that shocked me that I'm not proud with the MUI at that time. When I was a student also, I'm not proud enough with MUI because most of the members of MUI included Pa Amin Fareh is one of the member of MUI. Most of the member of MUI, we call it as pensiunan or something like that. That made me not very proud as an academician. But when Mr. Fazlun told me at that time, oh yeah, the environmental activists in all over the world. So Indonesian Council of Ulama was progressive enough in Council of Ulama has unique fatwa at the time, because, and we cannot hope such kind of fatwa from Middle East Council Ulama or Middle East Council Ulama of those areas. I believe that those areas have not forests. Only Indonesia has forests, and most of the forests already logged illegally. So it is we understand that why MOE enacted such kind of fatwa. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about MOE basis in the COVID-19 mitigation in Indonesia, a political philosophy study. What is a base or basis? Basis, in my opinion, is a fast movement, a great movement. As we know that during COVID-19, these last 2 years, MOE has a great movement to overcome the COVID-19 disease. And I want to use the time effectively. My background study, I saw that prior research on MOE shows that since the time it was established, the MOE cannot be separated from political interest. Many researchers stated this, yeah? For example, Kimball, Van Dijk, Byers, Muhammad As'ad, and so on and so on. And we can show that since the establishment of MOE, 1975, MOE was under control by the New Order. And this, in the running time, also still controlled by New Order until the fall of New Order regimes. MOE, Pak Atok Mudhar conducted his research on MOE that most of the fatwa in MOE during the New Order, Suharto, Pak Harto leadership, most of them, what we say, supported and also relevant with the regime interest. It is according to Pak Atok Mudhar. But whenever MOE's political role increases, its religious authority decreases. Therefore, during the New Order, Pak Harto leadership, the acceptance of MOE according to Indonesian people is getting lower and lower because MOE controlled by the regime. And after Reformation, MOE trying to make a distance with the government, and we can show, Bu Husnul already mentioned some of the event that MOE also tracked by the people. 2015, Din Samsudin, on behalf of MOE, stated officially on the prohibition of golput or abstain. And November 2016, GNPF MOE emerged to face Ahok after 27 September 2016 incident. Unfortunately, MOE was not refused it officially enough. So many people believe that MOE enacted or produced the fatwa related to the KNPF MOE. And 2019, Tausiah MOE on AIDS neutrality and encouraged people to keep peace, unity, and brotherhood during and after general election. Ladies and gentlemen, nevertheless, since the COVID-19 pandemic, MOE has played an active role in COVID-19 mitigation in Indonesia. MOE produced 12 fatwas, legal opinions, 8 fatwas in 2020, and 4 fatwas in 2021. And also 12 programs related to the COVID-19. Are there, the question is, are there any political interests on it? In my screen, I wrote there, MOE's fatwa related to COVID-19. For example, swab test during fasting is allowed, fatwa number 23, 2021. And also, Sinovac vaccine is halal and allowed, fatwa number 13, 2021. And also MOE's programs related to COVID-19. We have COVID-19 hoax eradication program. MOE has 12 programs related to COVID-19. And this we will discuss in my last presentation. And my background study also, I saw that discussion on MOE's role in mitigating COVID-19 in Indonesia were very little. Studies on this topic, which were done by many researchers, tend to see the role of MOE through 4 perspectives, namely Islamic law, sociology, communication, and medicine or medical. No one studying the role of MOE concerning to the COVID-19 in the perspective of politics, especially political philosophy. My study question: why MOE as a religious organization played an active role in mitigating the COVID-19 that already performed by government? What is the organs of MOE to join that kind of basis? Meanwhile, the government already has many programs and huge fund from the government. This is number 1 of my question. Number 2, why MOE has changed its political role from pragmatic politics to prophetic politics concerning to the COVID-19. As we saw in the table before, that MOE and politics has close relation. For example, we have Tausiah. Tausiah number, what kind of number? Tausiah number number 1, 2004, for example. Tausiah that people should vote the candidate who are faithful, good behavior, and committed. This is very tendencies Tausiah, according to my opinion. So Tausiah related to general election, most of them tendencies. For example, Tausiah in 1999 issued 1 week before election. Tausiah in 2004 issued 3 months before election. So whenever the election come, MOE issued 1 Tausiah related to the election. After the distancing MOE from the government to a free rule of free action of free position from the government. That was interesting for me. And then second question, why MOE has changed its political role from pragmatic politics to prophetic politics concerning the COVID-19. Number three, what are the activators of the change? Number four, in the perspective of political philosophy, is that change categorized as a good change? Because I have limited time, I want to jump to the research result and then finish. My research result, why MOE as a religious organization played an active role in mitigating the COVID-19 that already performed by the government? The answer is MOE has at least two reasons. Number one, MOE has got aware that COVID-19 is an extraordinary disease that covers all countries in all over the world. All components of the nation, included MOE, should play an active role to overcome the problem. So this is a normative reason. If we refer to the ADART of MOE, MOE is not allowed to affiliate to political party. Yeah? And reason number two, MOE wants to serve the people, Ummah, as stipulated in the rule of MOE, to serve Ummah. MOE has no political interest in its active role in COVID-19 mitigation. When I hear this answer from the exponents or board of MOE, actually I didn't trust yet to this answer, but I will see what happens in the post of COVID-19 as our topic in this seminar. What happened? What will be done by MOE in the post of COVID-19? It will, his old disease will come to MOE, penyakit lamanya kambuh atau gimana, karena sahwat politiknya very high in MOE. And the question number second, why MOE has changed its political role from pragmatic politics to prophetic politics concerning to the COVID-19? The answer is MOE realizes that based on the MOE's principal organization, playing the pragmatic politics is incorrect. So the kind of pertaubatan because of COVID-19, therefore it wants to go back to its identity and its mission. What are the question number three, what are the activators of that change? According to my sources, the strong inner conception of the Sharia goal, maqasid Sharia, that religion should protect the five things, namely religion, ad-din, soul, an-nafs, reason, al-aql, descendants, an-nasl, property, al-mal, all catch strongly by the board of the MOE. And this is coming a very old concept, because this concept was stipulated by Abu Ishaq Ash-Shatibi, was passed away at 1338 AD, ya, AD, ya, 1338. And the fourth question, in the perspective of political philosophy, is that change categorized as good change? I want to underline what is the difference between political philosophy and political science. Political philosophy pays attention to the ideal world. What is a good thing and what is the bad thing? what is good government and what is the bad government and his impacts to the people. So if Bu Kusnul talk about the government is bad or good, it is the topic, one of issues in the political philosophy and not political science. The answer is yes, it is. COVID-19 has made ME went back to its nature in politics, namely prophetic politics, and avoid pragmatic politics. But ME has to pay attention that temptation to the pragmatic politics is still bigger from internal and external MUI itself because of three reasons. In what Bu Kusnul mentioned, 212, 4221, this is a formation of playing football, for example. Whenever I heard 212, 4221, GNPF, NU, MUI, Gerakan Nasional Penyelamatan Fatwa MUI, as one of Muslim scholar educated in ilmu usul fikih, suddenly I asked, what happened this? Because fatwa in Islamic law is sukarela, what we say in English? Voluntary. The people could prohibited to be forced to join the fatwa. So GNPF and MUI, at that time I asked to myself, what kind of creatures this? Makhluk macam apa ini? It does not make sense for me, GNPF and me, because fatwa is voluntary and prohibited for Muslim scholars and ulama to force the people to join this fatwa. Therefore, three reasons. Jadi ada penyakit yang mudah kambuh di MUI itu interested to a pragmatical politics. Why? Because of three reasons. Number one, bad recruitment. Where is Pak Amin Fari? Yeah. MUI has no SOP how to recruit new board, new members of MUI. There is no system or solid system to recruit the member of MUI. So everyone can join. Who closer to whom can join. So that's the problem. So when the new member has big desire to politics, he will bring MUI to close to the political practice. Number one. Number second, financial dependency. MUI has no financial dependency. It always kerjasama, what we say in English? Cooperate with other institutions to have program. So this is a problem. And number three, lack of organization order. Whenever the member or the board bringing the MUI to his political agenda, the leader of MUI cannot ban him or cannot give in a punishment. Why? Because the lack of organization order. Okay, thank you all of the participants. I hope you pardon if you find many mistakes. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you so much Pak Muhyar Fanani. Very interesting presentation. I think from Pak Muhyar Fani presentation, we got a lot of knowledge about the history of MOE politics from New Order to now regime. MOE played an active role in handling COVID-19 in Indonesia, and now MOE become more important partner of government to convince Indonesian people to have an appropriate and good understanding about what the government want from the people in COVID-19 era. And the important thing, very interested, I think is MOE produced 12 fatwa related with handling COVID-19 pandemics, and this make MOE more closely with the government and political parties in Indonesia. And then Pak Mo here explained about what happened in MOE organization now, more closely and more active in political practice from the political philosophy paradigms. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now come in the Q&A section. We have some questions, but I would like to select several questions. The first question is from Timur, Mas Timur. He is our student, now graduated from political department in FISIP Wali Songo Semarang. This question directly to Bu Husnul Mariah, but I think this is still related with the other speaker to answer this question. I will read this question. I pose this question, talking about the socio-political dynamic of Indonesia during the pandemics, many people think that the Indonesian government tend to lack a clear concept in an effort to create state stability during the pandemics. In the view of some Indonesian people, indeed, from the beginning, the strategies and effort taken by the Indonesian government in tackling this pandemic did not use the health approach as the measure, but rather sought strategies to politicize the pandemic. Some of the factors that underlie this we can all know, such as Indonesia's increasing debts, and this is exacerbated by the increase in political oligarchy, whether consciously or not, is also related to the increase in the wealth of some government elite. It is also possible that massive degradation of democracy is happening in Indonesia. What is the simplest way that we can do to create a balancing and controlling strategy for the government in democracy law in Indonesia? I think it's a very good question, yeah, and create this question from Mas Timur. Halo, Bu Husnul Maria. Bu Husnul, are you still in the Zoom meeting?
Pak Maksun,
Okay, please, Bu Husnul.
I think give all the speakers to talk, because I think only how many minutes left, so each of us can speak and respond for the question. Start from Pak Aspinal, and then Pak Tayyip, and then Pak Andi, and then came to me, and then something like that is much better. So with a different perspective.
Okay, thank you for your suggestion. Now we have 30 minutes left. Start now. I think I wanna read the second question. I think as every speaker can answer this question. The second question is from Ahmad Gunawan. The main goal in Islam is salvation of the souls, but there is no uniform in legal politics in dealing with the corona pandemics in some countries. What approach is most appropriate for Indonesia and ASEAN countries, more concerned with the safety of the soul and more concerned with the economy, especially Indonesia? And then I have the question too from every speaker here. And I listen and learn from the all speakers that explain about the democratic regression in Indonesia and the other countries in the South Asia. Explain that there is some problem faced by the South Asian democratic countries, such as democratic regression and others. But The question is, what should be done to strengthen democracy in Southeast Asian countries? I think this is my question. Okay, the first speaker who wanna answer this question start from Prof. Edward Aspinall. Prof. Ed, I think every speaker has 5 minutes to answer all questions. No, yes, we still have 30 minutes. Prof. Ed, hello? Time is yours, Prof. Ed.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just unmuting myself. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you for all the questions. I won't try to answer them all. Maybe just briefly to refer to Mastimo's question. Yeah, I mean, Mastimo's question touches on quite a few different topics, but one of the interesting questions I think that it gives rise to is, you know, he said that the Indonesian government has been seen to have an approach which isn't really emphasizing the health response. And I would agree with that. It's been very clear that from the beginning, it changed over time, but from the beginning, the primary concern of the government, and especially including of the president, has been with the economic effects of the COVID pandemic. And we've seen many times that the government has been rather slow, in particular to reduce activity, been very worried about the potential impact on the economy and on people's livelihoods of slowing economic activity as a result of lockdowns and PPKM and so on. One way to think about this is to consider the sort of political coalitions and interest groups which are influential in contemporary politics, and Ibu Husnu Maria already mentioned the role of the oligarchy, and I think it is very true that there is this particularly powerful coalition of economic interests that are seen as, that have a outsized influence in Indonesian politics. But the question is, why do other groups not have an impact? Why do they not have considerable influence and can balance the power of the oligarchs? For example, why do the epidemiologists and the groups representing the medical profession, for example, or lobbying groups representing the interests of public health, why do they have not so much influence? And I think one of the critical things that Indonesia really needs to confront, and this also goes to your question, Matsun, is how to deal with the influence of money in politics, right? So, and how to reform the political party system and the electoral system so that the role of multiple voices are heard. One of the big problems that we all know about in Indonesian politics at the moment is that a lot of electoral competition occurs on the basis of money politics and patronage distribution and clientelism and so on, and there's not much policy or programmatic competition. And that sort of political system really empowers political actors who have money, right? So it's not then surprising that when an important crisis, like a health crisis or a pandemic occurs, that the most important groups with influence on the policy outcomes are those who have the one political resource which really counts in the political system, i.e. money. And other sorts of social or political actors, like, you know, unions or health associations or doctors' organizations or organizations of nurses and so on, they don't have much influence because the political system is not really set up around providing inputs into policy. So I think that especially for Indonesia, that the ultimate source of a lot of these problems to do with democratic regression are this capture of the system of political competition of elections by economically empowered groups, which is manifested in the electoral system through the influence of money in elections. So this really goes to your question to Pak Mak Sun. You asked what can be done about democratic regression. I think this is one of the sources in different ways in different countries, but certainly in the Philippines, in Malaysia, this is also very, very relevant, that there needs to be serious efforts to address the connection between political power and money. And in the long term, unless that very close connection is not severed, then these periodic problems with the deterioration of the quality of Southeast Asian democracy will keep recurring, because you either have a political system which empowers those with money, or you have which then gives rise to political disillusionment and produces the sort of support for authoritarian solutions, for populists and so on. So there's a vicious cycle in a lot of the political systems which needs to be broken. So that's my main response to your question as well, Pak Mak Sun. What to do about democratic regression? In a way, the critical solution is to try to break the connection between money and politics, and therefore give space for other sorts of interest groups and other sorts of representation to have a more important political role. Thank you for the opportunity to address these questions, and I've appreciated the other presentations by the other speakers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat, for your explanation. Let's move to the Mas Asmil Tayyip. Mas Asmil Tayyip, now your time to answer some questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. For the first one, the politicization of the pandemic, I think I would like to echo Pak Ed, when he says that, we can see the similar dynamics in other countries, as well as in Malaysia, when it comes to, the interest of public health versus the interest of the economy. Right, so we see that debate in Malaysia, the polarization, and that's where you see where the money is, right? So who has the most influence in the society and in determining government policy? Even until now, but for the longest time during the pandemic, the most hated political figure in Malaysia is the Minister of International Trade and Industry, Azmin Ali. So, I mean, he's one of those plotters in the Sheraton move that I mentioned in my presentation. So he already started his, as a villain, and then the pandemic makes him even more villainous, I guess, So even to the point where, when he went on official visits to foreign countries, like trade missions, the people will comment on those, the foreign Facebook pages, basically just cursing him, it was crazy, it was so intense, like he went to Austria, I remember, meeting with the trade minister in Austria, and Malaysians were flooding the Ministry of Austrian ministers, the trade minister's Facebook page. Like all the comment section were full of Malaysians cursing, this guy, this minister. So embarrassment to Malaysia. But this is the debate that we have, because he insisted on opening the factories in Malaysia when the cases were on the sharp rise. So the factories were not closed, even though most of the clusters in Malaysia were found in the factories and in construction sites. So, but he refused to close down or even to limit the operations of these factories and construction sites. So that actually made the public really angry, because it's a reckless disregard for public health, and then adding to that, there's also a cynicism, public cynicism of the government, because as I mentioned before, this government were afraid of proving its majority in the parliament, right? So it tries to prolong, the period where the parliament not sitting, right? Not meeting. So one way to do that is to increase the number of cases in Malaysia. So I mean, this is what people think. Like the government deliberately allow the cases to go up so that it has an excuse, it has a pretext to not open the parliament, so that not to be subjected to the vote of confidence. So there's, I mean, I don't know, I mean, if there's a grain of truth to this, but of course, I mean, this cynicism is very prevalent among the people. So that's when it comes to the politicization of the pandemic, that's the kind of dynamic we see in Malaysia. And the second question about Islam, I think is quite interesting in the Malaysian case, because I guess the same like Indonesia as well, because we see in Malaysia, Islamic affairs is actually decentralized. It's actually under the jurisdiction of the state governments and the state Islamic Council. But then the public health matters actually are under the federal jurisdiction, the central government jurisdiction. So obviously there's conflict, because when people want to go to the mosque to perform their Friday prayers, for example, or to perform their group prayers, but they're not allowed to. For quite some time, the mosques were closed. So the people were angry, so like, oh, the factories can be open, but the mosques are closed, something like that. Adding fuel to the existing fire. And then there were also people who defy the government ban on opening mosques, so they do it, sneakily they go to the mosque, sometimes not even turning on the lights so that they don't get caught, by the authorities, and then there were clusters, like mosque clusters in some parts of Malaysia as well, because people defy the government ban to pray in a group. So then even right now, like the latest controversy that we had, right now the mosques are open, but I think with a maximum of 30% capacity. And then you have to do like advanced booking, get your names on the list, and you have to come early to all these things, And then the latest controversy was that there's one VIP who cut the line, whose name was not on the list, and then suddenly he appeared, and then the mosque authorities in Putrajaya, the administrative capital, ushered him in, so the people were angry. So like, why did this VIP get special treatment? We're here, we have to book and wait hours, before we can perform our Friday prayer. So these things are going on right now, especially when people see going to the mosque as part of their daily routine, or at least weekly routine when you go on your Friday prayer, and they're not able to do that. But then they see other sectors of the society, the economy, remain open. So they see there's a double standard here. And then finally, how to deal with the democratic regression. In Malaysia, I guess it goes for other countries as well, but it's difficult to carry out any kind of protests or actions against the government in power, right? Because of the social protocols and restrictions. But there are groups in Malaysia who still brave, the warnings from the government and the risk of getting arrested, and went out in the streets to protest. So there's this group, it's just called Lawan Movement. So hashtag Lawan Movement, who actually went out, like it was like 2 months ago, so there were a few hundreds of them actually went out to the street and protest in the middle of Kuala Lumpur. But they maintain social distancing, so they're like 2 meters apart, and so they sat on the road, with the play cards and everything, So, and then there were also like the small group demonstrations as well, So there's group against the contract workers in the hospital, for example, who were not considered as frontliners, and things like that. So there's small protests, but it's quite risky. And then because you don't know how the government's going to react. So there are these pockets of resistance, but of course, you can find more resistance, more dissent, and criticism online, on social media, especially. You can see, especially when this government is not particularly popular. So you can see all kinds of condemnations, as the example that I mentioned, the Minister of Trade, who's were hounded by netizens, by social, everywhere he goes around the world. I mean, not just Australia is just one example, but there are other places where people were hounding him online, so it's crazy. I mean, I've never seen anything like that before, so only for during this time. So that's what's happening in Malaysia right now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mas Asmin. Let me move to the Prof. Andi. Prof. Andi, hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Moderator, okay, I would like to explain the question number 2, Bapak Ahmad Gunawan. This is question about what approach is most appropriate for Indonesia and Asian countries, more concerned with safety of the soul or more concerned with the economy, especially Indonesia. Okay, I would like to share data and fact. Yeah, this is the reality of what the Indonesian government did. With the data, I think we can have more deep conclusion. Yeah. So if you look here, I hope you can see in the screen. Yeah, this is politik anggaran. Yeah, and our government. And we see here, yeah, budget in 2000. This is in 2020 and 21, especially in 21. We see the red color here. I will make it bigger. So budget for Kepmensos and Kepmenkes. Kepmensos is Social Department, the Department of, and then Kepmenkes is Health Department, is number 4 and number 5. Yeah. And the first budget is go to Kementerian PUPR for infrastructure, and then the second is to defense. Yeah. This is the second, yeah, and then the third is to the Polri, yeah, kepolisian, and then so it's mean that we can see here, yeah, the government actually think that the COVID will end in 2001. So I think from the budget they predict that they already prepare the economic will recovery soon, for example, but in fact this is not occur like that. And you can also see from the data here, yeah, as I share to you here from the allocation budget for COVID-19, yeah, and the national economic recovery budget is more going to allocated to the national economic recovery rather than to the handling COVID-19. As we see here, to healthcare sector and social protection, only about 1,085 trillion. Then if for national economic recovery is 350 trillion if we put together. So it's mean that the government, the Indonesian government, actually more at the beginning of handling the COVID, yeah, the situation of pandemic, they're more concerned with the economic impact of the COVID rather than to solve the victim or the cases of the COVID, and then so I see here, yeah, the government more prioritized to the economic sector rather than to the to control or to solve the COVID problem, especially in the health sector, especially. So that's why we can see that in the case of Indonesia, we witness many problem when there is some shortage in terms of the uniformity of the baju untuk kesehatan, ya, the uniformity of for the clothes, for the and also the masks. We get problem of tabung gas, ya, empty in the market and everything. Because I see, because at the beginning we not really think this is the government concentrated in this. Then after that, they realize that they must concentrate on the human safety first, yeah. So that's why they try to apply PPKM, even though this is a little bit late, I think, yeah. They apply PPKM in Java and Bali, and this can drop the number of dead people, yeah, and the new cases. They can drop. So they react after they see the huge number of cases and the death, and then after that we can see also even we can see what happened next in terms of economy. So I think the first approach, we must solve health sector first. Yeah, this is should be go to the health sector first. Then after that we go to the economic priority, go to the second. Otherwise, because we have a limited budget, so that's why to do that we also have to increase our debt. Yeah. So I mentioned the data about how the debt is increased following the years, and then I also would like to answer the question about how to create, yeah, a balancing and controlling strategy for government in democracy flow in Indonesia. In Indonesia, my thesis is problem in Indonesia because political intervention is too far into the provisional administration in Indonesia. So as long as we cannot control the political intervention or political behavior from the political actor, go too far in managing the provisional administration, we will still have a problem with corruption, yeah, collusion, nepotism. So I think we must start to reform, yeah, undang-undang politik. This is the first area I think we must reform, because even I'm not the ahli politik, ya, but I think undang-undang politik must be reformed, ya. Itu yang pertama harus dilakukan, the first one. Then after that we move to the to reform some undang-undang related to the administration sector. But if we not reform the undang-undang politik, I think we cannot solve the problem for the next future, ya. The problem is because the political actor, who the owner of the political party, sudah in the comfortable zone, sudah ada di zona nyaman, di mana mereka seperti memiliki suatu have own company, ya, politik. Jadi partai politik as a company, so they can control Indonesia by political party. And there is in the national level is a limited chance to have a fair competition. For example, independent calon juga tidak not allowed in the national level, and another issue, ya, related to this. So I think start with reform undang-undang politik, and I think kita mengharapkan politician mempunyai soul, ya, as a negarawan, ya. Jadi saya berharap walaupun tidak banyak, not many on politician as negarawan, but I hope that the head of party, I think they are not lost lasting, because I think soon they will expire, ya. Please give your pengabdian to the country to untuk membantu, ya, membangun democratic system menjadi lebih baik lagi. Kalau kita saya agak pesimis ya. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Adi. Let we move on to Husnul Maria, but I'm going to add the one important question from the participant. The question is related to the last part of your presentation about the various false statements that say Islam is undemocratic. The question is, do all Islamic groups in Indonesia respect democracy? What about Islamic fundamentalist group or Islamic political group? Are there any exceptions? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, UIN Walisongo should have the next another conferences, international conferences, to answer all these questions. But I would like to give some response for Pak Mokyar ya. Pak Mokyar, in political science, we are not only just studying about the public, about the politician, the behavior of politician. This one is even the behavior of politician in political science. We have to learn about the public ethics of the politician. But we are also studying political philosophy, and the basic of the philosophy, political philosophy is, of course, this is moral politics. If in our belief is supposed to be the akhlak, the religion, itu the highest if you are talking about moral ethics. And then we are also studying about ideological politics, your moral ethics, and so on and so forth. So by virtue, actually, political science, if you're learning political science, it's not only just who get what, when, and how. This definition that usually politician very, very understand about who get what, when, and how, something like that. So that's why they implemented one. Siapa yang dapat apa, kapan, dan bagaimana. So they did it. The second thing is actually, if I was talking about legitimacy, it's not only from the result of the election, even we are still talking about the process of election itself. More than 700 election workers were died, and there is no any single condolences from the president until now, I think. And there is no, like, the Minister for Health only talking about, oh, they are just so tired. But I think, do you think if you're tired, it's directly to die? There is no any single, investigation for that. And the thing, if you're talking about policy, because during the pandemic, we are talking about policy, and usually in perspective level, we call it like a VUCA, volatile, uncertainty, complexity, and ambigu. Because, if Pak Andi talking about the distribution of the funding, do you think that this distribution like that implemented like that? If you're talking about 75 trillion for health, actually, a couple of months ago in Parliament, they said it's less than 2 trillion they dispersed for that funding for health. But now the increasing funding of the COVID is close to 1,000 trillion. So where are they? Yeah, many of the institutions, many of like Kejahatan or something like that, they know actually, we can ask them. The second thing, if you're talking about this one, is, how to implement the policy. And I was talking about, why it's very important, the question about, they're always talking about the false claim of the Islam is something like that related to this one. Because they use it as a political jargon. Saya Pancasila, saya Bhinneka, saya tolerant, and the others not. And this one is usually related to Islam, and they supported by research, and NTT considered as Christian, they more tolerant rather than DKI because there is 411 and 212. So this is also that situation. But if you get back again to the policy, this is look like the model of Snokurgronya. Okay, the majority of the Muslim in Indonesia, you are allowed to go to mosque, and now you are not allowed to go to mosque. Or you have to, you're not allowed to have to celebrate Idul Fitri, Idul Adha in the mosque or in the field, lapangan, But at the same time, you can go to mall. You can go to, another club, something like that. So, if you're talking about the policy, we are going back again to the model of Snokurgronya. You're allowed to go to ibadah, mosque, but not you're allowed to go to politics, to ask a question of injustices, and so on and so forth. If you're talking about, like going back again, I think this is part of the global politics. Actually, I also mentioned in my papers about the global politics after 9/11 and after the books of Huntington, The Clash of Civilization, after the fall of the communism with the glasnost and perestroika, then Islam is one of the, between quote, the enemy of the West, something like that, or the liberal, more specific in terms of the ideology. So if you're talking about that one, and then, with 9/11, and then, the speech of, who's it, the President of United States, mentioned about if your country is not supporting the war on terror, then your country is a terrorist itself. How they implement this one? So then it's very easy, if you are not supporting the government and blah, 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 it's only just Islam, the Muslim group who are called it as terrorists. And also because of the changing of the government in Washington, from siapa namanya yang Republik to Obama, then they're changing the policy. The policy is counter violence extremism. And what's the policy in third world country like in Indonesia? De-radicalization. And who got the money for de-radicalization? The Muslim group only. So why? So that's why Din Samsudin at that moment he didn't want to receive, because he was the Ketua PP Muhammadiyah, he didn't want to receive the money from the, especially for de-radicalization, because this one only for the Muslim group. So before there is no any research or something like that, they put it, Muslim group or Muslim people who are criticized, we are talking about, bombing is something like that. They use it this one. That my question is, every time if there is like a POSO, like now they use different names, apa namanya di Papua, with the police involved in all this thing. It's not military anymore. But my question always, this is talking about state terrorism, not only the non-state terrorism. Who actually the farmer of terrorism? In Indonesia, usually I like using diksi, siapa peternak teroris? Because there is no answer. Even though as a political scientist, as one who can have an access, but actually, who's the farmer of the terrorists? Because the only reference usually only from Densus 88. So this is our problem in this country. And who actually always got this one? Like the last one in Surabaya, women and their children. Do you believe that? And then all this noises, the terrorist now goes to women, and they don't have but there is no any single counter, like a counter analysis. We just believe it. So this is also the problem as a political scientist, what's going really on. And if you're talking about non-state terrorism, we have state terrorism. Yeah. If you're talking about the game, who is actually fundamentalist, you have to give, whose organization that you consider as fundamentalist, because fundamentalist is different with like maybe radicalism is different also with fanatism, part of fanatism. So we have to make very clear of the definition of fundamentalism, because then you're just putting, like a general way, all this Muslim group who are against the government policy because unjust, and then you're talking about you're fundamentalist, you're radical, you're what is called fanatist or whatever, or you're terrorist, something like that. So this is very dangerous. Why don't we open the dialogue every time?
Okay.
Like what happened with 6 young people. Can you imagine? They shot in the eyes, they shot in the ears, they shot how many? In the heart. Not only just one bullet. 6 Laskar FBI who actually have to fight for justice for that. When we ask, even in social media, if you put the names HRS, they already lost. So this is also this question if you're talking about fundamentalism and so on and so forth. So that's why I was not talking about the political Islam per se, but more about civil Islam. If civil Islam try to get together from the issues we have suffered, especially during the pandemic COVID-19, why don't we just start to talk and be justice? And they said, oh yeah, do you think Islam can be democracy? What kind of democracy? Liberal? Money politics? Suap? And using the all this apparatus to win the election for one of the group, from one of the political parties? Or what kind of democracy? Free and fair election? Justice? Election commissioners become amanah, something like that, with numbers of voters registration and so on and so forth, because usually we call the devil is in the detail. The recruitment of election commissioners, then so you can imagine the recruitment of election commissioners only just like 1 month away to have the election day. Do you think that they understand about what's going on? Something like that. So the cyclus of election commissioners also, that's our problem. And the recruitment of election commissioners, we have a problem. And the political parties who are, so I agree with Pak Asfi that the heart of the problem about the democracy and politics is the political parties.
Okay.
The political parties that we have to work with them or to work for them, to make the democracy according to the founders, the founding fathers and mothers in this country, how to protect motherland, how to protect, how to increase, to improve welfare, prosperity, and mencerdaskan bangsa, and so on and so forth, like in our constitution.
Okay, Bu
So,
Husnul.
that one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bu Husnul. A very wonderful explanation. We are going to move to the last speaker, Pak Mohyar. Monggo.
Thank you. I want to respond, to give a response in the perspective of political philosophy. According to my opinion, that pandemic has taught us many things. At least we can learn 4 things from this pandemic, COVID-19. Number 1, the management of loss. How we can solve our heart that everything that we have can lose suddenly. All businessmen in this country, all people in this country lost many things during 2 years. Lost hope, lost opportunity, lost wealth, lost property. So we can learn from this kind of loss management. Number 2, we can learn from the pandemic COVID-19 that actual supreme power is God, not the state power, such as USA or China, for example, world leaders or wealth people. All of them became victims in this COVID-19 pandemic. So, and number 3, I agreed with all speakers before that I have been worried with the oligarchy. Oligarchy made everything difficult in this country. But in my opinion, oligarchy has close relation to liberal democracy. And This is not compatible with Pancasila democracy. I agreed with Bu Husnul. Not compatible. All of our founding fathers, especially Bung Hatta, already see this problem.
And mothers, Pak, and mothers, don't only just fathers.
And mothers. Yeah, Bu, also and mothers, Bu. Yeah, in the political philosophy, in my opinion, that the mother of liberal democracy is capitalism. And the mother, now I use mother, and the mother of capitalism is materialism. The history told us that capitalism, materialism is a one step to the nihilism. We can learn from VOC, the company of Dutch company, and also the Dutch government, how strong they are, how strong the Dutch government, because of the desire to catch the country, the East Indies in this country, all of wealth in this country broke up to the Holland, but all of them stopped and finished. So we have to pay attention to the materialism, because materialism will bring you to nihilism. Number 4, the most important thing in our life then, because materialism is not the essential thing, the most important thing in our life is the good mind, good tongue, and good deed. And our teacher, when we are pramuka in our elementary school, that siaga is apa itu? Suci dalam pikiran, perkataan, and perbuatan. So that's the great teaching doctrine to us. All of the leaders in this country, perhaps most of them not joining the pramuka when they are the kindergarten. So they are become antek of oligarchy. They are became antek of materialism. So who will take the responsibility of the founding father and mother of this country? Who will continue their struggle to free this country from the colonialism? But if we are a leader in whatever level we are, good mind, good tongue, and good deed of ourselves is not enough. If we are a leader, we have to transform all our goodness and kindness to our policy, our leadership, and our responsibility areas. Those are the challenges of the future leaders of this faculty of FISIP UIN Wali Songo. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to in the end of our discussion today, and on behalf of committee and the Faculty of Social and Political Science, I would like to say thank you so much for your attention, your participation in this event, and especially thank you so much to the all invited speaker for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your research, and we hope this we hope our our discussion today will be continue in the next time. And before I close this discussion, I would like to announce some information. I want to deliver the message from Pak Mohyar Fanani. For everyone that asks some question will get this book, the write by Pak Mohyar Fanani. The title is Spiritualisasi Ilmu Politik, Revitalisasi Demokrasi Pancasila. We have three speakers. The first is Pak Timur, Mas Timur, and then Pak Ahmad Gunawan, and the third, I don't know his name because, yeah, I know myself. And for everyone that get this book, I think you can japri, you can send message to my WhatsApp and delivers your address, and the committee will send this book to your address. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention and your participation with us in discussion. And I would like remind you that tomorrow we are still going to discuss and discuss about our topics in the parallel session. We have the 13th panel, and I hope all of you can join in our panels. Okay, let's we close our discussion today with the Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, and let we give the big applause for our organization and for us. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of plenary sessions today, which mark the end of the event today. And tomorrow we still have two parallel sessions. The first session will be conducted from 9 to 10, and within these sessions, there would be 7 panels. And meanwhile, in the second sessions, we will start from 1 to 4 o'clock, and there will be 6 panels there. And all detailed informations, including Zoom link, can be obtained in the conference manual. And for those who need the manual, you may email us at visip@walisongo.ac.id. Well, we are looking forward to your attending the parallel sessions tomorrow. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.